Bob Hoban of Hoban and Feola, yet another person brought into the industry through results of cannabis as medicine. So he shares with us his story, as well as a little bit of background on the 12 states that he's active in, including Washington, Oregon, Arizona. Enjoy. Bob Hoban, right?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
You're so much younger than I would think that you are, based on all of your experience.
That's just the moisturizer, I suppose.
That's it?
Must be.
Where's the moisturizer from?
Yeah, that's another question. I've brought in from Colorado.
There you go.
So,
so Hoban and Feola.
Hoban and Feola, yes,
right?
sir.
So Solana Business Solutions.
Yep.
You've got both things going, don't you?
I do.
All right. And you're on the Chamber of Commerce.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And how'd you get into this whole thing?
Well, how I got into the cannabis world is a personal story, actually. So in 2006, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So she was living in New Jersey, where I'm from, ultimately undergoing chemotherapy. I've got 2 young kids, so we decided to purchase a condo and bring her out here at least a couple weeks a month. I would stop by every morning, make sure she was getting off on her day well. And one morning I remember, and part of that routine was administering the slew of pills, right?
Right.
And I remember seeing her sit there, lifting one of these powerful narcotic pills to her mouth, and drool came out of her mouth because her body needed the medicine so badly that it really stuck with me. And I said, enough with this. Let me see what we can do. And I knew that Colorado had a medical marijuana program.
Right.
At this point in time, there's no dispensaries. There's really not even a lot of talk about the medical marijuana program, not only in Colorado, really across the country, in circles. Certainly nothing compared to what we have today. So I looked into it, got her enrolled as a patient, started making some phone calls. There were caregiver network websites at the time. Ranged from, hey man, I'll meet you at 7-Eleven. I got the best stuff in town.
Right.
To, well, I've got some oils and some things I make that she could eat that we think could really help her. So it really ran the gamut. And I knew my mother would never smoke anything.
Right.
So it was a matter of finding some things like that. And my brother and I weren't going to go out and make brownies because, we've done that and that never ended well. Right. For a lot of folks. So that was how I initially got into it. And I started to work with some of these folks, these caregivers at the time, to keep them in the gray area. This is all pre-regulation.
Right.
Worked with those folks. Obama's campaign promise occurs. Later on, the DOJ memo. Dispensaries start to pop up. These folks want to open dispensaries, so I counsel them as to what they need to know.
Right.
December 30th, 2009. We won a case against the city of Centennial on behalf of a client of mine, Canamart, still a client to this day, where I believe it was the first time in the entire history of our country where a court actually said to a city, you cannot use the federal justification, the alleged illegality at the federal level, to shut them down. And we got an injunction on that day. It made the news. And then from that point forward, my business and commercial practice, which had about a dozen caregiver clients, boomed rapidly. Never really thought about it this way because it was only 7 or 8 years ago. Talking to some of the guys downstairs, we are the OGs, the OG lawyers from Colorado on these issues, which is kind of fun. So that's how I got into the cannabis industry. Right. I have a strong passion for the entrepreneurs in the industry, and the medicinal side of the plant is a tremendous thing. So
your mother was there and you helped her. You had moved from New Jersey to Denver for school.
I did years before.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that's how you became a lawyer, I would imagine. What, University of Denver, if I'm not mistaken?
That's correct. Oh no, I'm a University of Wyoming guy.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly enough, I used to work right out of college. Went to Rutgers University in my great home state of New Jersey, and worked for the U.S. Secret Service in what was the World Trade Center right out of college. Completely dissatisfied with that job, found an opportunity one afternoon for a transfer to Casper, Wyoming.
Uh-huh.
Any Jersey boy would say, well, what are you thinking? Why would you go to Casper, Wyoming? I'm a big outdoors person. I do a lot of backpacking and mountain climbing, so it was really attractive to me to be in that part of the world, that part of the country.
Right.
And I quickly realized that Casper was not the place for me, but it did present an opportunity to go to law school in Wyoming as a resident for the period of time I lived there. And I'm proud to say I came out of law school with about $12,000 of debt versus 212 like a lot of folks.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it's a good law school.
Right. There you go. So that it was cheap and beautiful.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
Yes, indeed.
So, but we've got to talk about the U.S. Secret Service, Bob. What?
If I tell you, I'd have to kill you. But no, the truth of the matter is, the Secret Service is a department of the Treasury. So ultimately, they're responsible for a lot of counterfeit money investigation.
Okay.
So it wasn't the sexy presidential detail, although I knew some folks that did some of those things.
Right.
What we did, and this is why it was really so dissatisfying and disheartening, was the monitored versus enforced counterfeit money producers. And largely the ones we were looking at were not printing American money. They were printing Canadian money. So there was political and perhaps jurisdictional things that were way over my head at the time, and which I still don't understand. Right. That just said, well, we're just going to watch. We're not going to do anything about it. And these were largely, stereotypical Middle Eastern sorts. Right. So who knows, what was going on there or why things didn't happen, but wasn't really pleased with that. And my partner at the time, he was probably 2 years from retirement, and the prospects were not great for an exciting career. And
how old were you at the time? Young guy, right?
A young guy, right out of college.
All right.
Yeah.
So dealing with all that stuff, but certainly displeased with simply watching. I want to do, right?
I want to do something.
Right.
Yeah, I want to do something.
So how did you get the transfer to Wyoming?
Again, this was a momentum in my head that was building. I got to get out of here. Right. This is not for me. I need to do something different. All through college, I worked really hard in restaurants and bartending, and I would take long road trips every summer. Fell in love with the West, backpacking, did a lot of things like that. And I was just looking for a reason to get there. When I saw that, I said, there's the key. I applied literally that night. Right. 3 weeks later, I was in a U-Haul driving west.
So how similar is Wyoming to New Jersey, Bob?
Very, very similar, as you know, very densely populated with antelope. Very, very different. But that was the charm of it. Honest to God, New Jersey's a great place to be from, and I love my roots, and I love the people on the East Coast tremendously. Right. But you don't run into true blue, good characters like you do in some of the rural parts of the West. And it was a culture shock at first, but it was eye-opening and really great. I met some great people, and ultimately it led me to Denver. And but for that, I may not be here today, and that's one of the most exciting things that I can imagine.
There you go. All right, so you went to school in Wyoming, went to law school in Wyoming. Yep. Besides what they taught you in school, what did you take from Wyoming?
What did I take from Wyoming? I took, my girlfriend at the time from New Jersey decided to follow me.
Oh, wow.
Out to Wyoming, which is, people from New Jersey don't leave New Jersey.
No.
Unless they're going to the Bahamas or something for the weekend, or Florida.
Or 6 feet under.
Oh, yeah, there you go. the Meadowlands end zone.
Right.
But so that was a wonderful thing. She came out with me, and I went there with a girlfriend and I left with a wife, which is a wonderful thing.
Same girl.
Same girl?
Yeah.
Same girl. Now I've got both a girlfriend and a wife.
Right,
That's another story now. No, that was great. I met a lot of good folks that I still talk to today that work in different areas that actually help a lot of my clientele in different governmental agencies. The thing about going to law school and living in Wyoming is you met everybody. You met Supreme Court justices. You met politicians. You met people at the highest levels because the state was so small, and this law school was very small, and Wyoming produces a lot of very, very smart, successful people, even though some of the Dick Cheneys of the world get the bad rap.
Right. Okay. Well, personalities are going to get attention, I guess, right?
Indeed.
And especially if they're the Vice President of the United States.
That's right. That's right.
So instead of talking about him, let's talk about you.
Let's do that.
Why leave Wyoming? It sounds great.
No, it was great. My wife was a teacher, and Colorado had a really neat alternative certification program. We got her in. In fact, I was going further remote at the time. I had gotten a job right out of law school working for a federal judge in Anchorage, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
So that was on a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I had interviewed with some folks in Denver a couple days before. My wife was not going to be able to be licensed without prior experience as a teacher in Alaska.
Uh-huh.
So that was a problem. And Colorado, like I said, had this neat program.
Yeah.
We ended up coming down here. She has a job. I called those folks up. They give me a job on that Monday. I declined the federal job and ended up working in Denver.
That close to being from Alaska.
That's correct.
Wow.
Correct. Well, I know that my family, they don't like to leave New Jersey. Getting to Denver's one thing, but getting to Alaska, that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole different proposition. Exactly.
So, no cheesesteaks there.
That's it. All right. So what was the company that you got a job with in Denver?
Well, I actually started working with the state court system. So I worked
Okay.
as a staff attorney for about a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then I worked in federal court as a staff attorney back in Wyoming. Then joined one of the larger firms in Denver.
Uh-huh.
Worked with them for about three and a half years on commercial transactions, real estate.
Uh-huh.
And about that time, that's about 2005, 2006, when my mother was beginning to get ill, I left and effectively started my own practice, and the rest is history.
Got it. Okay, so you had some experience working at a different practice.
Yes.
And why did you feel the need, the pull to leap into your own practice?
Partly because I'm an independent person, partly because I saw on paper that I generate X number of dollars and I'm getting paid, X minus 80% of those dollars or close to it. So it was a bit of an entrepreneurial thing, which by the way, segueing back into the cannabis industry, that's why I love it so much.
Yeah.
I fancy myself an entrepreneur, and I think that I don't understand lawyers that work in the business world that simply consult with people year after year after year after year instead of trying something themselves.
How do you mean? Well, dive in there.
Look at a successful lawyer in perhaps a large law firm that may even have a national presence.
Mm-hmm.
And year after year, people come to them and they say, tell me how to set up my business. Tell me how I do this. Tell me how I do that. And they'll make their fees and they'll be very successful. And they'll have a number of those clients. But to know that and not have the curiosity to do it or try it yourself,
right?
Whether that's starting your own law firm, starting your own business, investing in other small and medium-sized businesses, to me, that's the benefit of learning this stuff,
right?
From other entrepreneurs, other clients, and applying your legal knowledge to that.
Mm-hmm.
But to just say, I practiced law for 25 years and I've helped, 700 businesses succeed. That's a good thing.
Sure.
But not trying it on your own, I question that.
Did you do it type of thing?
Yeah, did you do it?
Right.
Because those that can't do, teach.
Well, then that brings us back to your wife, but we probably shouldn't do that, right? No, that doesn't make any sense.
Made that mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's my fault. Not by Seth said that. Not by.
Well, and I teach at the University of Denver, so I guess I'm just as guilty.
There you go. And that's the University of Denver thing, by the way. Okay. And there's no way that I believe that phrase, those who can't do teach, because my mother was a teacher, one of the best teachers ever, as any of her students will tell you. So.
A teacher with a big heart goes a long, long way.
That's it. That's exactly right. So you start up your own law firm, and you're telling us, though, that you also, want to do. So
Yep.
Take us through the progression of the law firm, and then when you added the next thing.
Yeah. Well, starting a law firm in and of itself was a difficult thing.
Mm-hmm.
And settling down, actually, because another thing I do is I'm also a basketball referee, basketball official. So I've reffed D1, D2, men and women's college basketball. I've reffed minor league basketball for years. That was my passion in the West in particular, because there was a league that no longer exists called the IBA, the International Basketball Association. So I did that. And then once my wife got a steady job in Colorado and we decided to have kids and I decided to start the law firm, that went away. So then I started to look at what things can keep me interested. That's when I went back to school and worked on my PhD coursework.
Right.
Always thinking about what's my next move. Invested in some real estate. Then the cannabis opportunities came along, and they were plentiful. But I largely resisted investment in the cannabis industry or becoming partners with folks, except for because I didn't want to get intermingled with my clients. Really.
Got it.
That was just an ethical thing so much as anything else. But I did invest in real estate. So I own pieces of a number of cultivation facilities and some storefronts across Denver and the metro area.
Based on the land itself.
Based on the land, getting
Right.
leases and subleasing it and owning a piece of property. And that's an investment I'm comfortable with, knowing real estate very well.
Right.
And then consulting opportunities came along. And as a lawyer, it's tough to consult and be offer professional legal services because you can cross that line, and where does the ethical duty stop? But that's neither here nor there. A lot of the folks that work with us at Solana are independent contractors that have specific expertise, and whatever the case might be. You want to set up a cultivation facility, or you need advice with plants and how to maximize your yield. Marketing, business plans, things like that, that I know folks that are really, really good at doing that and have a lot of experience in the cannabis industry. So I just started to think, well, let's bring them all together and put them in the same room and offer those services to people. And that's been a successful thing.
There we go. All right. So we want to get into both of those things a little bit further. But I got to bring you back to this basketball officiating.
Yeah.
So is that something you currently still do?
No, I'm going to get back into it. I coach now.
Okay.
I coach my son and my daughter's team. I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Proud to say that the 10-year-old boys were three championships in a row.
Congratulations.
I've got 10-year-olds running a high school level offense, which is exciting. My daughter's team, they're much smarter than the boys, but they're fun to coach.
Right.
But I haven't officiated in several years. I do hope to at least get back at a higher level at a high school down the road.
Got it.
A lot of travel was involved, and it doesn't work so well.
Doesn't work so well with how busy you are.
Yeah.
But what lessons did you take from the court, right? And the basketball court, I have to say to you, lawyer.
Minor league basketball in small towns across the northwest part of the country is an interesting thing because largely it's akin to college football in the South. I mean, this is all they've got in their town.
Okay.
In terms of a sports team, it builds community. People get fired up about small town basketball. So the very first game I ever did was the Billings Rim Rockers versus the Minot Snow Bears.
So Billings, Montana.
That's right. Minot, North Dakota. So, it was a battle of powerhouses. Very close to the playoffs, too. And it was about a 9,000 seat arena. Probably halfway, 2/3 of the way full.
Wow.
I learned, you have to go with your gut. You have to stand tall and be confident, and you have to be able to take criticism, because you're the guy with the number on his back that nobody really cares for. Sometimes not even your partners when you're out there on the court.
Right.
So that was that. And but no, that's a blast. It really is, and it's something I wish I had pushed harder years ago. But I'll get back.
Right. Well, I just to continue there for a second, because I think that you're the first basketball official I've ever spoken to.
Well,
how did you get into that? Did you play?
I did.
Okay.
I played at a high level in high school.
Okay.
And attempted to walk on at Rutgers University. Did not make the team.
Okay.
I'm very slow.
Got
my
it.
nickname at certain times was Molasses, so that's where I'm coming from. But I love the game, and that was an opportunity that was presented to me. Was why not become an official?
There you go.
And never really thought much of that. And officials are an interesting breed, but it was fun. It was fun.
So, and you don't mind the criticism, as they say, right? You got to let that roll off your back.
Yeah, the same thing happens now. When you're successful at anything. Or if you're the guy with the number on his back, people are going to always point the fingers at you.
Right.
You just got to get used to it.
Right. And no one minds blaming a lawyer either, right?
No. It's an easy target.
Yeah, indeed. And just quickly, last question on basketball. Swingman, I would imagine, 2-guard and...
small forward. I could hit the 16-footer with regularity. Maybe good for 5 or 6 rebounds.
That's it.
You need a technical foul, I'll bite the guy in the neck or something. That's my job.
Right. And somewhat consistent from the line.
Oh, 80% from the line.
There we go.
80%.
Yeah. That's the game that we would assume.
That's right.
All right. So Hoban and Feola, you get in. You are working with dispensaries. Give us the timeline of rules and regulations, and amendments being passed, and what you were doing and how you were doing it.
So as I mentioned, that Centennial case earlier, that was, pre-regulation. So meaning there was no top-down regulation. There was no local regulation. There was this caregiver system, which is in our Colorado Constitution, which basically said patients have certain rights to obtain and possess marijuana, and caregivers have rights to cultivate and provide marijuana for patients. So then, at that point in time, dispensaries with that perfect storm of the economy being in the crapper, combined with the Obama campaign promise and later the DOJ memo, they said, let's start to open our doors and see what happens. We can stay in this gray area where we're not going to get prosecuted criminally. So what happened was the local government started to see these stores pop up all over the place, and they said, well, how do we deal with this? This is crazy. Local governments were wrestling with the idea. The state legislature said, well, we got to do something about this, because at that point in time, how do you shut them down? You can't go arrest everybody because they're at least in a gray area. It would have been a waste of law enforcement resources to arrest people, confiscate the marijuana, at least at the state level. The feds didn't know what to do. They stood back, consistent with at least what their policy was at the time.
Right.
So the local government said, well, let's go after this guy on zoning grounds, or they didn't have a business license, or they didn't apply for a sales tax license. So it was all these nuanced things, which I had a lot of experience with. And ultimately, that led to that case. And at that point in time, they were wrestling with the legislation that was going to come in the session, which began in January. So you looked at about a 3 and 4 month period where a lot of people were talking. A lot of people thought it was the medical marijuana idea was a sham at the very beginning. And very, very quickly, the politicians and the policymakers met people that this helped. And they realized that the medicinal aspect of this is very real. We need to regulate it from the top down. Colorado went and did that over the next 4 and 5 months. And then the local governments followed. Some of them banned, some of them limited the number, and then some, like Denver, opened up pretty widely.
And what were, some key cases for you that followed the Centennial case, tent poles along the way?
Well, so the waves were as follows. You had the Centennial case. Then there were similar situations where dispensaries, for lack of a better way to put it at the time, they were being shut down in Jefferson County, west suburbs of Colorado, outside of Denver. Different counties were shutting people down, saying, you can't exist here. And then they were further emboldened when the legislation did pass that gave them the ability to ban locally. They said, we can shut you down because they said we can ban you. Well, what about the rights? At the point, there was no business license, so there were property rights associated with those businesses. So we sued multiple cities and multiple counties over the next 6 to 9 months and tried to obtain an injunction like we did in the Centennial case. We weren't successful at getting an injunction again, and the courts became much more restrictive than that original court in Centennial. And the judge, Christopher Cross, really did a good job and went out on a limb on that one.
Right.
So
is that the same guy, the musician, the singer?
Sail Away. Yeah, that song was played a lot that night after that victory. But a lot of those cases ended up in appellate courts within the next year and a half. And ultimately, people started to say, I can either comply with the regulations, relocate my operation, or I can fight. And by and large, our advice to people is spend your money on your business. Don't spend it on us. Right. Unless it's helping you grow your business. Let's not litigate. It's uncertain. It takes forever, and it's going to cost a lot of money. So then people just started to move and do whatever they could to comply with the local rules and the state rules in different places. The next wave of significant litigation issues became partnership disputes because the legislation required vertical integration, meaning growers and retail people needed to connect. And it was said to me once, and I believe this is true, there's plant people and there's people. Right. They don't necessarily mix. Right. And when they do, it created a lot of problems. So then that was the next wave of litigation in the industry, was partnership disputes for about 2 years. Okay. And by and large, litigation, I mean, there's still issues, breaches of contract, things like that. But in the industry, some of the legal issues, you see that happen in court, are much more tame, and people are much more focused on growing their business dealing with complying with the regulations and sometimes dealing with a lot of enforcement action from the state agency and the local governments.
So it started with city disputes. It then went to partnership disputes. So now you're finding that we're not fighting within ourselves so much.
Yes.
So what are the disputes that you're now working on? What's coming through your office? What's across your desk?
There's a lot of we do a lot of transactional work, so we make sure that do a lot of buy-sell agreements. A number of investors helping them get legally into the business in one form or another, both in Colorado and around the country. A lot of hemp work involving FDA and FDA compliance. At the state level, it's trying to keep everybody compliant with very complex rules that change. The interpretations change very, very often, and that leads to enforcement action. So you'll get letters from the state agency that says, you are in violation of X. Here's a show cause order. We're going to put an administrative hold on all your products, dealing with pesticide issues, dealing with departments of public health. A lot more what I'd call administrative or regulatory matters now than private disputes that end up in a court of law. These end up in these quasi-judicial administrative type proceedings.
Yeah. So good on administrative. So those are, hey, let's just get this done type of thing.
Yep.
But regulatory. So the rules keep changing, and that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Where are the blips in the radar as far as enforcing regulations? And I guess let's just focus on Colorado for for a minute.
Yeah. The rules change quite often. The interpretation of the rules changes perhaps even more frequently. To me, as a professor who teaches regulatory classes at the University of Denver, that shows me that regulation's working. If I could change things on a dime without having to go through the legislature, that causes some uncertainty for the business world, but it gives the public confidence in the system, and it does give the consumers some confidence that they're buying a product that's going to be safe for them, and it gives the politicians comfort. So to me, that shows regulation works, right? On the one hand. But what are the issues you see? As simple as failing to strictly comply with the seed-to-sale tracking system. Maybe it's just a data entry error, literally. That'll cost you $10,000 to $17,000 in a fine, perhaps some other stipulated agreement to not do business for a couple days. The Med has a serious job, and any of these state agencies do, and they've got a lot of scrutiny on them. I think, unfortunately, our state agency today is going in the direction of becoming more strict in terms of their enforcement versus being more business friendly. The difference in the Colorado model versus models around the country is Colorado hired cops. Cops to run their administrative agency,
to run the marijuana enforcement division,
Med, and to their credit, they're very curious. They wanted to learn the product, they wanted to learn the industry, and they treat it very professionally, not like a stereotypical police officer would.
Right.
But then look at other states. Other states hired lifetime business bureaucrat sorts, and again, this is all stereotyping, but it's largely true. Look at Washington. While it's not necessarily a successful market model right now because they've got some blips in the road, but these states like Washington, they hire business people that say, all right, here's how you get this done. Do X and Y and Z versus I'm going to stand in the way of trying to get this done, which seems to be the mentality in Colorado. And because of that, you've got enforcement actions on so many different things, alleged hidden ownership. Well, just because somebody guarantees a lease for you or lends you money does not make them an owner that's not disclosed in the regulatory structure. But if they think they smell smoke, there's got to be a fire there somewhere.
Okay.
So those are the things that you deal with on a regular basis.
Right.
And by the way, when there's an investigation, and there's lots of them, it shuts down the entire ability for that business to do anything. Transfer locations, change ownership. Do a lot of different things that require what's otherwise a simple piece of paperwork and a fee. All of that gets held up, and that causes deals to fall apart. It causes people to get sued or go to arbitration, and it needs to be a bit more business friendly. And the current environment is not that way, and because of that, there's lots of regulatory issues to deal with.
Lots of stuff.
Yeah.
And Bob's doing it. You mentioned Washington. What other states, either are you working with or hearing about, and the differences and similarities in terms of suits?
Yeah. We work with folks in about 12 different states.
Good.
And that representation ranges from simply helping them compile their application.
Mm-hmm.
We've got several awarded recipients in various states on the lottery system.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, we are licensed in other states in Washington and Oregon and Arizona now. So we work
Mm-hmm.
with some of those folks on some of their business structure issues. No litigation in any of those states. Writing some regulations and some potential legislation. I've worked on legislation in Costa Rica.
Aha.
In fact, I'm going down there in a couple of weeks for Canna Costa,
Mm-hmm.
which is hopefully a groundbreaking conference where medical marijuana is pushed through in Costa Rica. And then I'm bringing my class from DU down to Uruguay in August, and with the hope, and I'm talking with some folks to work on the regulations for them down there. So those are some of the things we do outside of Colorado.
Sure.
Personally, those things are of great interest to me because it helps you use a different part of your brain. You're not just in that litigator or that legal mode where you're going from A to B to C.
Right.
It's a little bit more creative, and that's always exciting. You can step out of the box.
Let's talk about that Uruguay trip. When are you going?
It's August 12th through the 25th.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And what is the purpose? What are you doing?
I'm taking a class down there. I've taught several research practicums on marijuana regulation. I've taught government regulations and a public policy advocacy, basically a lobbying class. So I'm taking some of the best students from those classes down there. What did I call the class? The Regulation of New Markets, Cannabis in the 21st Century.
Right.
So that's the idea. The idea is to go down. We're going to work with the Catholic University of Uruguay, do some workshops with some of their students. We're going to meet with folks from the National Drug Policy Office. We're going to meet with business owners, people on the opposite side of the advocacy front.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to meet with different folks that have different concerns, just a lot of the stakeholders, if you will.
Yeah.
And my personal interest is this is what's unique about Central and South America. You've got government decisions from the top down.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to legalize this versus what happens in the U.S. In the U.S., nearly every significant marijuana regulation in the 22, 23 states that allow it comes from the people.
Right.
The people have to vote for it. Say, hey, here's what we want, politicians.
Right.
Versus South America. So there's two components to it that are of particular interest to me. There's the economic component. Hey, we can tax this and generate revenue. But we're also talking about countries in parts of the world that have this significant illicit drug trade.
Sure.
Not just marijuana. That goes far beyond that.
Right.
How is that going to shake out?
Right.
I mean, we've got evidence in Colorado that there's really no cartel activity regarding marijuana. Well, how's that going to shake out in South and Central America where we talk about cartel activity in the U.S. with our resources and law enforcement. What's that look like down there? That's going to be fascinating to me. And who are the people that make the decisions to basically try to take marijuana out of these seemingly powerful cartel type forces? There's lots of interesting issues there.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, South America, Uruguay, obviously legal 100%.
Yeah.
And you're going to spend 12, 13 days down there. So we'll figure out a little bit more.
That's right.
Costa Rica, is that your first trip down there?
No. In fact, the reason I'm working with those folks is I've got a good client, a good friend who owns a dispensary in Colorado. He bought a house down there 10 years ago. I've been there 2 or 3 times. And the lawyer he used is a pretty powerful lawyer, younger guy, great guy, is very well connected in the country. And he happened to have a client that wanted to push this, and they knew who we were, and we were involved in that way. So I've been to Costa Rica 5 or 6 times total.
Excellent. Okay. And what is the state of cannabis regulation and legislation as we speak?
Legislation's written. It has an interesting component. It would allow for export of both hemp and marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they exactly know where that's going, but they like the idea that door's open.
Yeah.
It also, interestingly enough, provides a minimum threshold of production for growers on both the hemp and the marijuana side. So we're not talking about, hey, you can grow 3,000 plants. It's you must grow, X number of tons per year. It's pretty over the top in terms of the production that they want to get to. So those are some interesting features. This conference is going to bring politicians from South America and different parts of the U.S. I'm bringing a couple folks from Denver down with me.
Good.
We're going to hopefully persuade what is pretty much a very Catholic conservative Latin American country that medical being the key, medical marijuana is a real thing and a good thing. And the discussion there is not yet about the business aspect of it, but it's about politicians in the U.S. and elsewhere have wrestled with this issue, and here's how. And by the way, here's doctors and patients and people that really can show you that there's some benefit to this. This is not a ruse to just allow marijuana.
Right, exactly.
So.
Here's an example of epilepsy being solved somewhat.
Yeah.
All right, so let's come back to the states, and you mentioned Washington. We've had conversations with people like John Davis where they're building the plane as they're flying it. Is the analogy that's been made?
Yeah.
Where are they in that process? You said that it's business people, doing the work there, so that's good.
Yeah.
Where are we?
Well, here's the difference too. What happened in Colorado was the industry opened up, started to operate, and actually the market, while it's been distorted with the regulation, the market kind of had a chance to meander its way and figure some things out before regulation for a little while.
Right.
It's a lot different than saying, all right, everybody apply, line up at the starting line, and then you have the starter gun go off, and everybody go. Well, everybody's going to trip and run into each other and fall down, and that's the best analogy I can come up with that's happening in states like that.
Right.
How can the market – we don't have an accurate market in Colorado to really depict what's real versus what's being distorted and twisted based on the regulations and government policy. What does the actual economic market look like? It moves so often. How can you do that in a state where you're just saying line up and go?
Yeah.
So I think that's the fault. I don't know any other way to do it.
Right.
Because again, remember, they basically are eliminating the medical system at the same time as creating the rec system, unlike Colorado where our medical system existed and the same owners got to go into the rec business first. Mm-hmm. So it was a continuity there.
Right.
They need to figure it out that the supply side, the retail side, there's just no nexus. There's no experience as to how things are supposed to go, and a lot of local governments stand in the way there. So again, it's that starter gun mentality where people are just stumbling. That should shake itself out.
Well, give us a timeline based on the fact that you Colorado and you know what is working in other states too, in other countries. Where does Washington kind of settle down, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, here's the deal. We really, in Colorado, after 7-8 years, still don't have an idea. What's the actual real market price of a pound of marijuana?
Right.
It's manipulated by regulation, by and large, in different places and markets that come online. So is it $1,800? Is it $2,200? Is it $2,400 a pound? And the state needs to know this information, by the way, because of the excise tax that's tied to that.
Right.
But if you look at that, and we're struggling with that as a reality 7-8 years from now, it's at least 5 years in Washington and other states till they have some semblance of stability in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. With the consulting company, I've gone to places like Vancouver, Canada, and gone to places that are, lining everybody up at the starter line, or where they're open like Vancouver and they're going to have potential top-down regulation coming soon. How can you build your business model to anticipate all of the different road bumps and speed bumps and regulations that are going to come? How do you do that so that it impacts your business in the least economic impact? Mm-hmm. And those are the things that business owners can do, but that still doesn't mean when you've grown up and you can walk. Mm-hmm. But I think at least 5 years, and that's not good news for anybody because they don't have the benefit like the folks in Colorado did of having the Wild West days where they could make a lot of money pre-regulation and have some experience in how to do things. It's going to be pretty lean times for quite a while.
So that's interesting based on everyone's perception and what's reported in the media as far as, it's reported quite differently.
And the government folks think everybody's rich.
Yeah,
everybody's rich. Everybody's got, money falling out of their pockets.
Absolutely.
And while the revenues might be there, the cost of compliance and regulation and doing business is so substantial.
Especially if I have to, as we talked to Bob Esquino, change my packaging on a dime.
On a dime.
Yeah.
On a dime.
You mentioned Vancouver. We're going to Vancouver with Cannabis Economy, our event, and we're going to, kind of have a conversation about what's happening there. You've already been. Give us your word.
Vancouver is Denver several years ago, pre-regulation.
Okay.
There's some folks that, you'll walk in, there's a doctor in the back corner in a room, not even a doctor, it's a naturopath you can have in Canada. So there's a naturopath with people lined up at the door, free visits to the doc to get your card, which isn't really a card. It's simply a business card that says you've seen the doctor. Mm-hmm. There's no security. There's no orderly check-in. There's no separation of the dispensing area from sort of the public area. All things that, in a perfect world, I think that'd be great to set things up the way they've set them up there, and that's why they've done it. But you have to know that this is not going to pass muster in the long run,
right?
When it comes down to the regulations being put in place. But there's some good folks up there.
Where do you think, if it's Denver a few years ago, where are they going? You know that there's a Supreme Court judgment coming down this summer. Tell us about what your thoughts are on Health Canada, who regulates, and where do you think we are?
Well, Canada, it certainly seems like to me, in my limited experience up there, that there's a top-down, motivation to sort of quash this whole thing. And Vancouver's basically this liberal and progressive city that's trying to do really, really advanced and good things, but that's not going to fly with the other side of the country and some of the powers that be. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, I think things get worse before they get better up there. But interestingly, the Vancouver experience was largely tied, as I understand it from those folks, to the legalization of Washington State.
Yeah.
So Washington State happens, and then Vancouver says, well, look, everybody wanted to come here before. Now we've got people going down there to purchase marijuana much more freely and legally. Bellingham, Washington, for example. Let's open up. Let's really go over the top on this, and let's ruffle some feathers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So they have almost two kind of categories, kind of like we have in the States, but it's a little bit different here with the compassionate care centers, and then what the compassionate care centers see as the corporate production facilities.
That's
right. So there's there's a little bit of that going on as well.
Well, there is, and that's sort of a mirror of what you're seeing in Colorado and across the U.S. I mean,
California specifically.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it a bad thing that we've got to the point where things have to be conducted with millions and millions of dollars in a really high-level, sophisticated business structure, and effectively pushes mom-and-pop type people out? Is that a bad thing? I think it's a necessary thing, unfortunately, because I think that's what gives politicians and the public comfort that things are being run well. When it comes down to it, mom-and-pop folks have a role in the industry, and that can be a profitable role. But you can't go it alone in this industry due to the complexity of all the issues you have to be an expert on. Business, plants, people, all these different things really present a lot of challenges.
And so, that gives us a sense of where we are. I still want to make sure to talk about Oregon and Arizona with you.
Yeah.
Oregon is going to come around here on adult use, right?
They are.
Yeah.
There's some political motivation to make it happen very, very slowly. It reminds me to a certain extent of it's a different angle on this thing, but Chris Christie in New Jersey, we've got a program there that's aimed to help people, and basically he's saying not on my watch, right? And that's effect what some of the higher ups in Oregon are putting their foot down and saying. And then even when that shakes out to the extent it does, it's still a situation where they say, everybody line up, let's go.
Right.
I admire the risk takers and the entrepreneurs and the people that are going to these different places and giving it a shot on one side of the business or the other, because it ain't easy.
No, it's not. What kind of timeline would you give Oregon if there are, folks in the way?
Yeah, no, with folks in the way, you're probably looking at a 7-year process till things settle down.
What about
this? It assumes, of course, that the presidential U.S. federal situation doesn't change dramatically, right?
Doesn't get in the way of the whole thing. What about Arizona and medical?
Arizona's got a pretty stable market. It's pretty tight. It's pretty well regulated. The folks that are in seem to do fairly well for themselves. There's not a lot of opportunity for new folks to come in because of limits and because of just certain grandfathering in certain areas. So there's not a lot of new opportunity in Arizona. But where it is right now, those people, they tend to stay compliant and do fairly well for themselves.
Yeah. Where do you see, where is the best medical program? If 23, 24 states, where is it?
Well, here's the situation. Here's what I think about. If there's the medical side and there's the rec side. I'm a believer in markets. I believe in, economic theory to me would dictate that if you just put a recreational market in place, the marketplace would fill all the needs because there's an economic incentive for it to happen.
Right.
So if it's just recreational, does that mean patients are going to be left out in the cold? No, it means that there's going to be a business in that rec market that's going to make products that are specifically tailored for patients and people that have specific conditions. And there's ways to make sure that they get tax breaks too, much like a tax exempt card that a church or someone would go to a school or to a store and get a tax discount. So there's a way to do it. And I think that's the model of the future, and I think that's the way to go. It's a careful play, and it's an easy play for states to say, we're going to go medicinal only, and it's going to be either just edibles or just CBD or whatever the case might be. That's the way I look at it, like a beta test. Let's see how this floats,
right.
And if that works, maybe we take the next step or the next step. But the good news is, even in some of the most conservative states in the country, they're at least talking about the idea that we need to have some semblance of medical marijuana, even if it is just a CBD oil.
Yeah.
Because there's people that get help from it.
Right.
That's the biggest surprise to me, is that people actually recognize that there's some benefit to this plant that we all know
right.
has a tremendous benefit to people.
So people are coming around.
Yeah, big time.
Kind of three final questions here. Take us through what you guys are doing with the Chamber of Commerce.
The National Cannabis Chamber of Commerce is a fairly new organization. Started in the West Coast and sort of moved through the Southwest and the Northwest and is moving east, and they've made a good run in Colorado. I like the new blood. I like the sense that folks are coming to the table with new ideas and capital and are really looking at the industry in a sophisticated way, how to advance it from a PR and from a product and a consumer safety perspective. So there's a lot of folks that are doing that, and that's the push we see. And really, it's just to give folks new opportunities.
And the final questions for you in particular.
Yeah.
You did mention what has surprised you. And maybe that is your answer, but the two final questions are what has surprised you in cannabis and what has surprised you in life. You did just mention what surprised you in cannabis, but do you want to expand on that or change your answer?
It's the same. I'm gonna change my answer, Your Honor. What surprised me in cannabis is how fast people that know nothing about marijuana, policymakers in particular, have said, "Wait a second, this is real." They go from the position automatically that this is a sham and this is just an excuse for everyone to go out and get high, to go, wait a second, look at this little girl and look at this guy with PTSD and look at this cancer patient and look how it helps them. Wow, these people aren't lying. And how they embrace that idea and how they educate themselves and how people are starting to understand the difference between THC-based medicine and more CBD or other chemical components, cannabinoids in the plant.
Right.
So that surprised me,
right.
How fast that's occurred, because in this old industry of 7 years, a lot has happened so fast. What surprised me about life so far is it's just been a great ride. I've done a lot of different things. Sometimes I wish I was out on a basketball court all the time,
right.
But by and large, I'm lucky to work with the folks that I work with, lucky to work for the folks that I work with, because without folks that are risk takers and that are willing to plow the ground and do things the right way, I would add, it wouldn't be nearly as exciting for me.
There you go.
That's a pleasure.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And we'll keep checking in with you.
Appreciate it.
And I'll see you down the line.
Sounds like a plan, Seth. Take care.
Thanks, Bob.
A basketball official. I mean, he's a referee. Well, at least he used to be. Love to hear the fact that he said, from his understanding, that there is some semblance of medical marijuana, conversation happening even in the most conservative of states. And that's just good news. So, hope you enjoyed.